Hi everyone, I'm Sally Eaves and a very warm welcome to this special feature which I think really brings to the fore what leadership in technology is all about, and especially from a diversity, equity, inclusion and belonging perspective, something really close to heart to both of us here today. And to this end, I also think that visibility really matters. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce a leader in technology and a really good person. And, I've heard so much about you, Cheryl. I can't wait to dive into things with you today. So without further ado, it's Cheryl Ragland, CMO at Spirent. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, absolutely. You too. Absolutely. And again, part of my real passion for this is I know a lot of the activities you've been involved in, they're really close to heart. And again, sharing about this, I think it matters so much. So without further ado, I talk about the person behind the tech quite a lot. And to start us off, perhaps you just share a little bit more with the audience about yourself, your role at Spirent, and perhaps like a moment of meaning along the way, because I think those nuggets and sharing about that can make a difference to so many people.
Yeah, great. So again, my name is Cheryl Ragland. I have been CMO of Spirent Communications for about 4 years now. I have 2 wonderful children who are grown practically, 23 and 20. So have been keeping me busy. And what I am responsible for at Spirent as CMO, I really cover everything from a global perspective. So I look at anywhere from PR, AR, influencer relations, campaigns, both digital events, webinars, brand management, obviously, and then of course, operations, marketing operations, which is so important as well as really tracking that data and making sure that we get that information in about what's working and not working. So I cover the gamut across the globe.
I love that. I love that. And kind of that gamut across the globe we were talking about that, or those diversity of activities and experiences actually kind of brings me on to another theme. Because I think there's so many varieties or differences in routes into technology or data as an industry, as a career. And I think that's really fascinating, particularly like the non-linear paths in. And I love to share that in some of the mentoring activities I get involved at. And also, different skills make a difference. I kind of imagine a toolbox really, or like a painting canvas, and all these different kind of things you can tap into. We need that variety. So I wonder if we could share a bit more about your route into tech, what attracted you and what's really empowered you as a woman in tech.
Yeah. So I got into tech right out of college. I wouldn't say I had everything figured out and I knew what I wanted to do exactly. So that's okay, by the way, not to have everything. I started in sales. So I actually worked for AT&T for a while, sold long distance service to small companies. And I think it was really important for me as I continued my career into marketing, because I think learning how to sell a product or a company is so important, because until you sit in that seat across from that customer, having to explain it, I think it really helps to have that sales experience as I went into marketing later on. And my really path was not necessarily linear. I did operations, I did product marketing for a while. I did communications. So I really got a taste of everything and decided, marketing was really where I wanted to be. Yeah.
I love that. Love that. So many flavors, isn't there, in terms of the roles that you can get into in tech, isn't it? Which I find really fascinating. And I love to stress that. We talk about STEM a lot, don't we? And I often kind of move beyond STEM to STEAM, so kind of arts in their broader sense. Because again, I think that's really, really valuable too. Different routes in, but also different skills make a difference as well.
Yeah. And I think it's really important to take every job you've had and to be able to learn from it. It may not be where you end up. It may not be where you want to go necessarily wholeheartedly, but you've learned something and you've taken something from it to help you in the next position. So I think that's really, really important, to not always feel that you have to take that linear path, because you're learning with everything you do.
Definitely, we're learning what you're enjoying, and it's through that experience, that experiential learning makes that difference, doesn't it? And being curious, I love that. I couldn't agree more. Another thing I found, makes a real difference as well, is around mentorship, and also kind of moving beyond that to sponsorship as well. And it really does take that ecosystem, doesn't it, of coming together of allies and mentors to really help lift everyone up. How important is that to you? And I know you do a lot in this area. So again, I want to really shine a light on why mentorship matters so much collectively and to yourself personally.
Right. No, I'm really passionate about this. I have, growing up in tech in my career, I very much was probably one of the only women in the room at times, right? So I feel very passionate about mentoring the younger women that are coming up the chain, because to have that ability to talk to someone who's been through it and done it, I think is very, very helpful, because you get a different perspective. But I think, you know, things are changing so much in the workplace the last couple of years, or, you know, and they will continue with AI coming into it. It's important to have people who are, you know, able to give you a different perspective, but also help you in answering some of the questions that you may have. So I know that I spend a lot of time, I've taught at some local colleges, my alma mater, as well, to make sure that I can share my experience and things that you need to look out for as you go into the workplace, and how you continue to build your skill set, really, as you go throughout. So it's hugely important. I would recommend that to anybody, whatever company you're in. Make sure that you're looking for those allies, and that can really help and support you. So very important.
Definitely, definitely. It makes such a difference. And I think we all have those moments where we reflect back of, you know, a particular conversation or being put forward for something, you know, whether it's a panel or a job opportunity, but somebody kind of having that confidence in you and kind of sharing that, and going kind of beyond mentorship to sponsorship as well. I think we all have little moments like that that have made such a difference. So yeah, love what you're doing there.
Yes.
So important. And also just thinking back on that as well, just thinking of Maria, who was a former manager of mine in telecoms, where I kind of have a CTO background basically, and she had that role for me. So I'm just going to kind of put a shout out to Maria, just thinking back on that too.
Yeah, pay it forward too, right? Like every time you
Absolutely.
have mentors in your life, how great it is, and then how great it is to sort of share that knowledge back
Exactly.
with other people. It's important.
I totally agree. And kind of on that setting as well, as I said, you know, I was former CTO in the telecom sector, and obviously with your role CMO in telecoms as well. I'd love to kind of look at how your role has changed here as well, because obviously so much is happening in the marketing scene, particularly in telecoms, in the last few years. So what have you seen there as the biggest kind of catalyst for those changes, and how are you supporting customers and negating those and supporting their marketing messages and strategies too? Again, so much dynamism here. I'd love to kind of get your take on how your role has changed and what you're doing to support that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right that marketing has changed. It's continuing to change. It will continue to change. As I mentioned before, the AI, really, I think COVID changed a lot of the impact. I know I had just entered into Spirent at the time, and a lot of the traditional marketing activities or tactics that we could use, like events, were no longer there, right? So you had to go digital. I think social media definitely picked up. People were looking more and more towards social. So we wanted to make sure that we provided an outlet to the company there to share our story, as well as influencer relations, utilizing people like yourself that come out that can give us a much broader reach than we could ever do as just a company, really getting that message out. I'm a firm believer in an integrated marketing approach. I think that that is really important. It's not going to be one tactic you do. It's going to be several tactics, because how I relate to something is probably very different to how you relate to it. And that consistency of message and that long-term, right, ability to stay in the game and keep saying the story over and over again, because you're getting people that come in for just a second, right, to look at what you're doing. And you need to be able to be very clear, very concise. And I think inspiring, especially, it's been an interesting thing for me, is balancing that technical expertise that the company has, with pairing that with more of the marketing solutions, benefit type messaging. I think that complements each other very well. And I think it helps customers if they look at what they want to go buy, how they're dealing with problems of their own, to remind them of the benefit of what they're buying constantly. And then, of course, pairing that with the technical is always great. But I think that's been something that I've definitely tried to complement each other as I've been inspiring, especially. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think one thing that always remains the same is the compelling story and the human-led aspect to the story as well. So what I've seen really powerful is when we've had marketing that really brings together in a very authentic way impact that has shared value. So you're demonstrating, the innovation for business, but also the contagion effect, that impact we can have for society as well. And when we get stories like that, and particularly for certain audiences, with Gen Z, Gen Z, for example, when that purpose is to the fore, the difference you see in the response is really noticeable. So I think that I totally agree with what you're saying there. And the kind of one thing that remains the same, I think, is that human story, and if not more so today.
Yes.
I'm definitely seeing that.
And being able to leverage other customers that are using our solutions, that's what's really going to get customers excited and understand how we fit into it. So humanizing it is so important, but making sure, and it doesn't have to be just a press release, it could be a video. Video is becoming more and more important. So I think those ways of getting them to relate in to what you do, them personally, again, totally important, very, very important.
Definitely meet them where they are, meet them where your customers are, where their home is. Definitely, that's the thing.
Yeah,
and especially on certain channels as well. Well, I think the other thing I would notice is maybe a kind of a blurring of lines more and more as well around B2B and consumer marketing as well, particularly on certain channels. So that's another interesting one, perhaps.
Yeah, such a great point. I was reading something just the other day about how TikTok now can be used in B2B marketing, which I think is fascinating, right? Probably years ago, we would never have thought about that. How Instagram is becoming more important as well. So I absolutely agree. There is that blurring of lines between where you would have considered traditional consumer type tactics with what we're seeing in B2B. And we need to not forget, we are dealing with humans, whether we're B2B or consumer, it is about how the person actually relates to it. So something I know I stress with my team.
I love that. And you mentioned team there. And again, people right to the fore of what we're talking about at the moment. And I'd love to drill in your experience there in team leadership in terms of kind of data-driven culture and how we enable that. Because I think it's so critical. And going back to our starter today about how we can embed inclusion, diversity, equity, and for me, this belonging, kind of, if you imagine kind of that hierarchy of needs, I kind of go up to that as the top of it. But how are you kind of enabling that? I'd love to share some of the experiences with yourself and obviously working with Spirent to support the team and build that culture that enables, real optimization of the technology too.
Right. Now, I think a lot of times it can become about the leader, right? About who the leader is, who they're leading their organization. In fact, I've come to find it's all about the people that I hire, right? And if I can get the right team around me, and that complement each other. So I think to your point about diversity, right? I don't want everybody thinking the same way. I want people to complement each other and to be able to disagree and get to that common goal. But I think it's really, really important to take the time to build the right people and to get different skill sets on the team. Everybody's going to be good at something different, and that's fantastic. And I always say to my team, if I'm the smartest person in the room, then that's not where I want to go. I want you guys to challenge me and come back. So I think building that culture of making sure your team feels like they can come in and voice their opinions and that they each have a voice in what we're going to go do and that they're all aligned on the goal, right? And the objective, I think, is important. Data just helps us do that, right? Because then we're all looking at the same Bible, we're all looking at the same scorecard. That helps us. But really that we're all feeling like we're rowing in the same direction is hugely important. So I feel very lucky right now at Spirent. I have a fantastic team that I work with. And it has helped us as we've gone through COVID, as we've gone through different tech changes. You need the people to be able to be resilient, deal with ambiguity, right? Because not everything is going to be spelled out. So I think that's another important trait that I have a really good team that does that. How do we respond fast and quick to things? So that's very important is the team around you. That's hugely.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we often talk about agility or ambidexterity, don't we, in terms of organizations, but it's much more than that, isn't it? As at team level, as you were describing, and at individual level too, and supporting that. I think that agility to change is one of the biggest skills of our time in many ways. So I couldn't agree more. It really, really matters. And celebrating successes, I think, again, at team level, massively important too, and opportunities to invest in skilling and upskilling and reskilling. I'm finding, both from personal experience, but from all the research coming out at the moment, skills investment matters so much to everybody in roles, whether that's data literacy or AI fluency, etc. as well. So I wonder if we could drill into that as well, because I think alongside culture, this skills investment piece, they kind of go hand in hand in many ways, don't they?
Yeah,
And
no, they absolutely do. They absolutely do. And I think it goes to something my team and I talk about this all the time. We have to be careful of that we're going to get it right the first time, right? Especially in marketing, we got to get comfortable with failure. And that doesn't mean that you don't meet the goal, but that does mean that you're going to get it wrong sometimes and that you're going to have to try again and pivot and change. And I think that goes right into your conversation around skill sets is we should always be learning, always be looking outside of what we know today. And it's hugely important to the team is to be able to build a skill set. They might not know everything about, let's say, AI, right? AI is coming in. That's a huge example. We need to be able to give our teams the opportunity to learn, to be curious. We talked about that originally. I think that's huge, and that's okay, right? They're not expected to know everything, but to really anticipate, some of the changes that we might have to make and make sure that they build their skill sets personally to go do it. Yeah, couldn't agree with you more. I think that's
I love that.
a really good aspect of the team is to make sure that they're curious and that they're getting the skills that they need to do it to be able to go forward with anything that we do.
I love that. I love that. And kind of that going forward with confidence as well, because there's one thing in terms of kind of democratizing access to skills and really supporting that, but it has to go further than that, doesn't it? In terms of helping people to actually apply those skills in their roles or new roles too. So for me, it's kind of that mixture and getting that balance right. And again, some research I've been involved in recently was talking about learning agility probably being the number one skill of our time, followed by things like creative thinking, EQ, AI fluency, etc. So if you put all those together, if you had a kind of number one skill to kind of invest in or invest in yourself, to share with the audience, or something you think that's being undervalued at the moment, kind of what would that be? I know you mentioned resilience there, and I couldn't agree more. And definitely curiosity, I think, is right up there too.
It's probably so simple, but to be able to take action, right? Is to be able to come into a situation to make a decision based on all the facts that you think that you may or may not have, but to have an opinion and to take an action forward to go do something. I think one of the things I've watched with all the data, especially in marketing, that we are able to get now, and it's all fantastic, but you can get analysis, paralysis, let's say, right, where there's so much and it's conflicting almost, right? That happens to all of us about it could lead this way or that way. You have to make a call and you have to make an educated decision and not be afraid to take action and to go execute something. And that is, something that I think we really have to encourage in the team and encourage for our younger team members coming in is don't be afraid to take action and to go cause something to happen. If it's wrong, we'll go fix it, right? We can go change it, but not to sit on the sidelines, right? Is to be able to get out there and to go do something and try to impact the results that we have. So yeah, absolutely.
I love that. I love that. And kind of coupled with that, we talk about learning. So unlearning, the ability and the willingness to unlearn as well. I think at all times at the moment, given all the new things we're learning, the new discoveries, whether it's from a scientific point of view or what data is shining new insights into, that ability to unlearn, I think, is never going to have mattered more. So I totally agree with you on that. I think that's absolutely fascinating and kind of bringing that all together. And I had a conversation about this recently, and we kind of end up in a summary saying the ability to gain new knowledge, I think, will be valued higher than the knowledge we have as it is now. Do you agree on that? Because I think for me, it maybe brings it all together.
I totally agree. And that's where I think data has helped us, right? Data is able to show the team what's worked. We all have gut reactions in marketing about what we think should work, how a customer will resonate with a message. I think the customer, you'll see the data, you'll see what works and what doesn't work. And we've done many things at Spirent where we thought would have worked, it didn't, and we can pivot. So I think to your point about unlearning, it's like, okay, we have to look at the data and say, we're not going to do that again. We're going to change paths. So, and having that ability to go and release and go, okay, I'm not going to keep doing it the same way I've been doing it is hugely important. And it's harder than people think, right? Because you have learned a certain way, you have brought a certain talent and skill set, and having to change that and not be afraid to do that is something that I think everybody is going to have to learn as we go forward.
Absolutely. And AI, I mean, going back to the AI subject as well, which is obviously everywhere, and different
Yeah.
flavors of generative AI as well. But that can actually, support us from a learning and development perspective too.
Right.
For example, identify learning styles and things like our metacognition. It can really help us to kind of learn smarter and identify what works for us as well. So I think that's another interesting area that's maybe a bit underexplored at the moment. But I'd love to kind of give a shout out for that too. But from your take, what are you seeing most from a marketing perspective around, the hype versus the actualization of use of AI, and how to stand out with, all the talk that's happening at the moment on this very subject?
Yeah, I mean, everybody says AI now, right? Everything is attached to it, especially for my, marketing team. Like, right, we have to be careful not to just say the word AI without having the meat behind it.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
we're spending a lot of time now of, are we designating this correctly as AI, or are we just trying to add the word, right? But I think from an AI perspective, for me personally, as I run the team, it's going to make huge leaps and bounds in our productivity, our ability to scale, efficiency of the team. I think those are things that I'm really excited about in content creation, being a global team, translations, things that make it easier for my guys to react and go out there and put messages out in the market at a much scalable level. So I think those are the things that I'm really excited about right now. And where it goes, who knows? There's every day it seems to be changing. I mean, the conversations, the videos you can create, just it's exponential with that. So, I encourage my team, let's be excited about it, but be cautious, right, about how we go utilize it. So that's something that we're working on right now, and absolutely investing in their skill set of AI training and things like that as marketers is very personally important to me, so that they feel comfortable with it, that they can then go and execute against our campaigns utilizing it.
I love that. I love that. And again, the confidence you mentioned there, absolutely vital. And I can hear that, when you're talking about the experiences with your team, there's a real enablement there. And I love that. I think it's the missing link between kind of training and development and actualization, and having that culture of kind of a non-blame culture, if you know what I mean. When you're learning through experience, you're going through things, you're trying. And if there is an issue, you're learning from that, reflecting it and putting it back in. That's how you get an innovation culture, isn't it? So I love the examples that you're bringing to the fore there. It's brilliant.
Yes, great. No, I mean, I don't want anyone to be afraid to come back and go, I didn't know it. I didn't understand that. Because that's not going to do me any good. My job as a leader is to bring out the best in my people. And if they are afraid to fail or make mistakes or not know something, I'm not doing my job as a leader. So I need to, make sure that they understand that, whoever has been on the team, whether they be new or somebody who's been with me for years. I think that's really important. And we don't do enough of that. I think we expect people to be perfectionists and to get it right on the first try. And that's just not reality. And that's not bringing out the best in what people have to offer. So, I'm very passionate about that with my organization, and I have been for many years. So it's something that I'll continue to foster with my work. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. And you mentioned that word foster, and there's a kind of analogy that's coming into my head as you're talking there between leadership and teaching. And I'm just remembering going back to some teacher training a few years ago, and there was an author, I think his name was Clapper, it's a UK author, but they talked about teaching as facilitation. And I think what you're talking about there, that facilitation, about bringing the best out in a team, and the different examples you brought to the fore about doing that, I think there's a really powerful kind of segue there. And you brought me back to AI as an example of that facilitation and action too, kind of two examples of it in my head. So ChatGPT, obviously lots of other examples of what we could be using as an example there too. But I was doing some work with students, and they were looking at how can we use this, for homework and that type of thing. And we looked at what they got back and how to kind of fact check and look at how good that response actually was. And it was fascinating to look at where it was actually quite strong, but where there were kind of things that needed to be kind of looked at in more depth, should we say. Alternatively, with a marketeer, had a conversation only last week about how they were asked to kind of write in a certain style for a certain type of audience and publication. And they kept going back to their manager and they couldn't quite get it in the right form. But actually using that tool, it helped them to identify how to kind of align it better to that audience fit and the demands of that particular magazine and style. and they got the feedback back. God, that's right on. That's what we were looking for. So it's really an interesting example of, there's strengths here, there are areas that needs to be worked on, but sharing the good and where there's challenges, etc. It's so important to be able to have those conversations and do that hands-on experimentation, isn't it? It's so, so important.
Yeah, and I think AI is a tool for the team,
Yes,
right? Exactly what you were saying. It can spark ideas. It can help clarify something that we're confused on. It's just another tool in our toolbox of what we can utilize to go do what we have to do. So I think it will bring a lot of value to the team.
absolutely.
It absolutely will. I think have to know how to use it, and that's the portion that we are really spending some time on. Is how do you prompt it to give you the information that you need? So that's because it is a different language sometimes, right?
Absolutely.
You need to know how to be able to use it in order to get the most out of it. And that's the skill set that we're talking about really developing. That muscle we need to flex that we probably haven't been doing. So yeah.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that. And it's almost like the keys of access, isn't it, in many ways? It's like learning any language, isn't it? Whether it's a foreign language or anything around a technical discipline, you need those building blocks and those foundations. That sounds
Right.
really interesting in terms
Exactly.
of, yeah, definitely.
Exactly. Exactly.
Love that. I was going to ask you next, often you see, and we've had less of this. I think we've got a little bit more balance overall. But I remember going back a few years and kind of every story that looked around AI, the sci-fi language, should we say, and a lot of fear kind of gets into those titles. Now we kind of get different extremes in different varieties, but there still is obviously a fear. It's a natural, human resistance to change in many ways, isn't it? But I think those powerful examples of how we can show AI is a complementary strength and working in partnership with us can be really important to kind of allay those fears in many ways. I want to kind of what you're seeing here about people's fears, about not having enough experience of AI, and how you're kind of looking at this and empowering people. Again, some of your examples with your team, I think, are great and kind of as a starting point for that.
No, I think everybody, let's face it, we are all going to feel like we don't know it because it is so new and it's changing so rapidly, right? So you're going to have that fear that you just don't know everything and you don't know what's coming. And when we don't have that, we feel like we're behind. I think it's more spending the time to get to know what it really is, how it can help you besides the hype, right? Because there's a lot of hype going out, which I think can increase the feeling of not knowing it and the anxiety of not having the right skill set. So I think one is to spend the time and to get to know what it can help you with within your job role and function. Getting that knowledge so then it doesn't seem so overwhelming, I think is going to be really important. And so that's my job, I think, as the team lead, is to make sure that I'm giving them the opportunity to get exposure to it and to go take training classes and things like that, and to give them access to it so that they can go play around with it. So I think it's really that knowledge, right? Building the knowledge about it and not being afraid of it. It is here. It's going to continue to expand. We're not going to be able to get away from it. We need to be able to really understand it. So I think that's the big part for me, is just to take the fear out of it. It's okay. We'll figure it out as a team. Let's go do it. Right. So, but I think everybody's probably wondering, how do I keep up? And it's just something we're going to have to work with our teams on.
Absolutely. And as we said earlier, I think with any kind of tech change, it's that education kind of going hand in hand that makes such a difference as well. And that helps to kind of build that confidence and kind of grow as you do, and making that information accessible, both from a team perspective and more broadly as well. I also think is a massive part of that. And that's something I've always been really impressed with Spirent as well. You do such great research and you make that very freely accessible. So I think that's great too. And I know one very recently, actually, your new ebook, and I love the title of this as well, given what we've been talking about. It's literally called Bracing for Impact, isn't it? In terms of how AI will transform digital industries. So we'll put a little link to the audience here about where you can go for that as well, because I think that's a really good job at looking at some of the kind of macro level and broader factors around AI and the changes it's making. So we'll share that too, because I think it brings together a lot of the topics we've been talking about and brings more of that access out there. So
Great.
I love that. Yeah.
No, great. Please check it out, because we did really put a lot of effort into it and did a lot of research, to your point. And I happen to love the title as well, because I think it really does go right to the whole brace for impact, right? Because there's so much new coming.
Absolutely, absolutely. And kind of bringing all this together, I think what I've found brilliant from this conversation is you're not just kind of doing activities that democratize the accessibility to learning these new skills and being empowered as part of a team and making that knowledge accessible more broadly too. There's a real focus on what happens next and the actualization piece of this as well. So it's very holistic. So I absolutely love that, because I think that's what we need. It's the accessibility, but the confidence to actually apply these two and having trusted sources of where to go. So Cheryl, thank you so much. It's been great spending.
Thank you. It's been great to talk to you. Appreciate it. Have a great rest of your day.
Pleasure.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you. And thank you all for watching and tuning in too. It's been an absolute pleasure. We'll be back with more very soon. As I mentioned, we'll be sharing the info around the new ebook too, a fascinating source of information, and that education, as Cheryl and I mentioned, it really does make a difference. So thanks so much for watching and tuning in. We'll be back soon. Thank you.